Good morning, everyone. I hope you can hear me. Let me welcome you to the Filmmakers Forum. The Filmmakers Forum is an activity of the School of Media and Communication of the Pan-Atlantic University. It is a platform where we try to foster engagement amongst filmmakers and between the filmmakers and the audience. Okay. Our guest today is Editi Effiong, who has graciously accepted to spend some time with us. There'll be room as we go along to take questions, so please feel free to drop your questions in the chat box. Let me welcome Editi Effiong. I see he has joined us now, and to thank him for agreeing to be with us this morning. If I may please just ask Editi if you please put on your video so that we can see you.
Oh, okay. My video was on earlier. I think it was disabled accidentally.
Okay.
Hello. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you. Right, so we'll get going. Once again, welcome to everyone. And like I said, we will take questions as we go along. So please feel free to drop your questions in the chat box or the Q&A, and we'll take them from there as we go along. Let me introduce Editi here. Editi Effiong is a creative entrepreneur with business interests in advertising, technology, and film. He is the founder of Anakle, one of Nigeria's biggest digital marketing agencies, and Anakle Labs, a technology company focused on building solutions for financial services and telecoms industries. In 2018, Editi founded Anakle Films, a company dedicated to telling the next generation of African stories through film. Anakle Films' first two theatrical releases, Up North and The Setup, have since been acquired by Netflix. Anakle Films also partnered with the U.S. mission in Nigeria and U.S. Justice Department to create Fishbone, a film aimed at raising awareness for pharmaceutical drug counterfeiting. Editi's first feature film as a director, The Black Book, has been called Nollywood's biggest film production yet by CNN. The Black Book is the most viewed English-speaking African film title on Netflix and was top in 69 countries. Editi has led digital communications and marketing for global and national organizations, including Wikipedia, Globacom, Diego, Access Bank, Sterling Bank, PZ, Reckitt, Benckiser, Oando, and British Council. Editi is involved in various non-profit endeavors in Nigeria, including the funding of clean water projects in northeast of Nigeria, as well as building and funding computer education labs in the south of region, Nigeria, which currently provides high-quality computer education for over 1,000 low-income children. He wrote, directed, and produced The Black Book, Nigeria's biggest feature film till date. He is or was the executive producer of Up North, The Setup, and Day of Destiny, producer of Up North, and director of Fishbone. That is indeed a very rich profile. So, Editi, you're welcome once again. Let's get the ball rolling. Sorry, we still can't see you. I think there's a problem with the video, unfortunately.
You can see me, surely?
Now I can see. Fantastic. I couldn't see you before. Now it just came up. Good to see you, Editi. Welcome once again. Let's get the ball rolling here. Now, looking at your profile, it shows that, well, you have a background really in tech. You began Anakle, a digital marketing agency, in 2011, and with a prior background in web development and the of apps. What moved you to go into filmmaking?
I was going to be a filmmaker irrespective. It was when I really think about it, the first thing I really did was tell stories to to tell stories. It's a thing. I was going to be a storyteller one way or the other. But I remember that growing up, I grew up in sort of a library. I say this a lot. I've said this a lot recently. So my dad has a master's degree in linguistics, first degree in
Yeah.
English literature. And so I grew up in this house with every single African writer series book ever published. And I spent my growing up years just reading. Read the Caribbean writers, read African writers. My favorites of the entire African writers series was the Great Puns. Great Points were my favorite. Things Fall Apart, of course, is like right up there. But Things Fall Apart is that book that I thought is so, it should never be rated, never compared to anything. So I just kept it apart, you know. But
Yeah.
of the books that I knew Things Fall Apart existed before I read it. Now, but as I read every other book, the book that stuck with me for the rest of my life, to be honest, and inspired me to write was The Great Puns. The book that really got me introduced to, say, my favorite poet of all time, Christopher Kibo, was Ali A. Mazroui's The Trial of Christopher Kibo. Professor Mazrui, who recently passed, is East African, but wrote this powerful story about the trial of a Nigerian poet who died in the Civil War, and basically putting him on trial for putting art, which he believed to be a global gift, you know, aside for, you know, to become a soldier in a what he termed a tribal war. And so it's those books that got me thinking and started me, you know, when I was 10 years old, writing. Because you read stories, the next obvious step is to tell stories. So I started writing my own stories, started writing my own poetry. But my siblings, who were my only audience at the time, were very clear, like made it very clear to me that the way I write is not meant to be read, but to be seen. Because I'm very descriptive, and I may not remember your name, but I never forget a face. I paint pictures in my head and store them away, and always remember. If you put me in a room, when I come back, I can tell you anything that's missing. It's how I grew up. It's how I
Yeah.
thought and always thought in pictures. So I always wanted to write for picture. I always wanted to write scene by scene. I always felt music in my head when I'm writing, you know, and didn't know what it was then. I didn't realize what it was then. And that music in your head doesn't become obvious until you're making your first film up north, and you're very clear the kind of music you want to hear in it. And you realize that this thing was always inside of you. So as a kid, as a teenager writing, you never really understood what those things that you felt were until you are now an adult, and you've passed through life in all facets and brings you to this moment to make films. And then you realize that that thing you heard when you were writing, that thing where writing is driven by the music in your head, is you actually preparing to create music for motion picture. It's a very convoluted way of finding my way to film.
No, it's a beautiful way of finding your way to fame, actually, because it seems to me that it was really a logical step to then go into directing. Because if you see so clearly, since they say that the film is really the vision of the director, so that do you think that that gives you an extra power? Because if you have written the film, you have visualized it clearly. Now, bringing it out, making other people see the same colors, hear the same music that you felt. I'm assuming that on the one hand, yes, it could be a great power, but on the other hand, it could also be rather frustrating because sometimes what comes out is not exactly what you have in your head. Is that the case? I
um,
mean,
I've
given the challenges of
I've
one
been
film.
blessed by two things. The first thing being that I worked in technology and advertising, which is built on compromise. Advertising is built on compromise. You have to learn to compromise. You think this is the greatest thing you've ever created, and then you walk into that client meeting, and the client says, Yeah, but and you have to learn quickly to spend the 5 minutes fuming, expressing your emotions, and then getting back on site to get the work that needs to be done. Because obviously, if it's not done, it's not done. Now, second thing, I think second blessing for me was having quickly a group of very important people who believed in the thing that I saw. Nazo Nuzo of Inkbloods, Zulu of Inkbloods. Zulu, I always say, oh, my film career too, because Zulu obviously was the first person that said, up north, the story I wanted to make has to be made. And Nas was the first person I met who actually listened to me and brought Zulu on board. But I ended up working with Tokwe Oshi, and Tokwe was the director of Up North. But because I was so involved in Up North, I created the story of Up North. I went to visit the places that I was writing about in that story. I I selected the locations before the director ever saw them. I went to do the Reiki, selected the locations, and took the director there. She was the first person who told me, "You have the eyes of a director." I made a joke. If I'm tired of this film, I just hand it over to you to direct, which ended up being prophetic because when we had to do the pickup shoot for Up North and she was not available, I had to go direct those scenes myself. And she helped me through that process of directing the pickup shoot. I would say, this is what I see, this is what I think we should do. I sent a video of that to her, and she was like, "Oh yeah, that's good. That's good. I don't have any notes." Or, "Okay, can you move this to the side?" So having those people, you know, have faith in me and say, "Oh, you can actually do this." It really helped me in that journey to deciding to make films of my own. And so I remember with the Black Book, I didn't think and I'm very, I think I'm very, I would readily say this. I did not want to direct this thing. It was bigger than me. The scale of it terrified me. So I wanted a director. I tried to hire a director, but I was also very clear in what this thing was, which is why it terrified me. I was very clear that it was a film that was going to take at least a year to make. And I ended up not being able to find a director who was willing to commit that length of time, that amount of time to one picture. And secondly, I think that I wanted to work with a second producer. And I remember the producer said, "This is going to cost like 300 million, and that's unnecessarily expensive, and nobody would raise that kind of money for any film anyway." So it was a thing where I could not at that point find believers in a thing I really believed in. So I decided I'm going to find my own religion. You know, I'm going to start my own religion. And then that's how I ended up, deciding I'm going to direct this. But I did suspect this would happen. And the other thing, I even if I said I was terrified, I did suspect that I might not find someone to direct this. And so Fishbone, in many ways, was my prep for directing a gritty story that the Black Book became.
Just as a bit of an aside, I'm happy to say that I have links with your father in the sense that he studied a similar course like I did. So I think I can fully appreciate what you're saying, all of that.
How many of
Great.
your children work
Now,
in the arts?
sorry?
How many of your children work in the arts?
Well, I don't have any kids,
Oh, because
but
my dad made
it's
sure that I do not. He made sure. He
oh,
never
really?
he made sure. I'm a pure scientist. I went to a pure science school. Yeah, which again became a blessing. I understand the word from every angle, really. I studied the social sciences university, so arts, humanities, science.
Oh,
I have
fantastic.
really good understanding of across board.
Actually, it's quite striking. On behalf, someone should do a study someday. But one notices if you take the polls, a good number of the persons who are going into filmmaking or who go into things of the art also tend to have a background in the sciences. I don't know if it's something that our parents make us do things we don't want to do and so on. But I do notice that, or more and more, you get more examples like that. But I think that's fantastic positioning to be able to maneuver in all of these different fields. Now, it is striking really that you have been the writer for the majority of your films. Do you see that going forward as what it'll most likely be always? That you will always write your films?
I think that I write the films I am deeply passionate about, but I am not agnostic.
Okay.
Sorry, I am agnostic to the source of stories.
Right.
If that makes sense, I
No, it does.
do I do believe that I might actually, my next picture might be a story written by me, but going forward, I'm also working with collaborators who have great stories, and I think my job, the most important job I have to do, is to tell stories or facilitate the telling of stories. And in this case, if telling other people's stories or building the platform for other people to tell the stories, great stories that they had on a platform that allows the biggest audience possible to see them.
Mm.
I, I am not averse to any one of those things. And I would say here that my biggest metric for the success of a film, a story, is audience. I think I want
Right.
my films to be seen by the biggest, largest audience possible, and I would always defer to that. Um, I don't put a lot of stock in awards. For example, I don't think that they are a true metric of what a successful product is. However, customers, I come from technology where customers are the true prize. You know, in advertising, paying customer
Yeah.
is a true definition of success. And so audiences is my big metric. And if I can help a filmmaker who was like, oh, I want to make this simple short film, and said, okay, but this story is strong enough to be seen by the entire world. Okay, can we make this investment here? Can we make this addition here? Can we add this technical resources here and there to take the story to the next level, to the level where it can be seen and appreciated by the rest of the world? If that is the thing that I can do at this moment in life, that would be, I think that was, I would have a sense of fulfillment doing that. And so just to summarize, TLDR is that I'm not averse to doing my own stories. I'm not averse to doing stories by others. I'm also not averse to helping others tell their own stories.
Something you just said, that you can guide someone to say, add this here or take this out in order to make it a film accessible to a global audience. That seems to me like you have some idea of what you will say are key ingredients to make a story global. What exactly will those be?
Hmm.
A deep sigh.
Yeah, I very readily would answer and say that I'm a first-time filmmaker. So I hope you're not putting me on a pedestal and hope that I really know what I'm doing. But
We're just
then the
sharing.
guys who work with me would point at me and say, but you said this film will be a global success from day one. And it became, maybe I was just spitting nonsense. Who knows? Um, However, the people who work with me long enough would also point out that if you look at my career in advertising, look at the top 10 most viral campaigns in Nigerian history, um, I created 5 to 6 of them. So there is a bit of a correlation there. And the reality for me is that human emotions are universal.
Sure.
The experiences differ, but human emotions are universal. People feel emotions of, joy, love, pain, grief. Everyone, everyone feels those fundamental emotions. And so it doesn't matter if those emotions are experienced by a Black person or a white person or an Asian person or a South American person, it does not matter. It is, if we are able to communicate those emotions clearly in the way that any human can understand them, then we can make a story that the entire world can see. Now, the thing I think we have to understand about now communicating this emotion is that the world is used to seeing picture of a certain standard. The world has Hollywood has made sure that, with storytelling has grown and cinematography has grown, and when we watch Hollywood, we come to expect a certain standard of picture. Doesn't matter what the story is. The story is bad, good, the picture is great. Or in action films, the bigger the explosions, the slicker the action scenes, you're gonna watch it, just if not for the story, but for how slick it is. And therein lies the challenge. So you have a great story, and for example, African stories have been, we've had great stories, and so you have that thing where the storytelling industry is dominated by Hollywood, and so the film schools are dominated by Hollywood standards, or international standards, say the British film standard, the Hollywood film standards. They dominate like film schools. And so now you look at the Indian film industry, the storytelling is different. The films are long, takes time to cook, but the Indian film industry has been there for a really long time, and it's become a standard. Nollywood has not been there for long enough. So most people who work in Nollywood have a lot of the film education from Hollywood, from the British, and the standards tend to be adopted. And now, where I come from in southern Nigeria, I'm Efik Ibibio heritage. Our stories tend to go ekonke nke kongobasi, and it goes slowly and weaves in and weaves out. You take that and put it in a Hollywood story, it becomes that it was dragging. It will be said that that story was dragging, even if it expresses all the human emotions.
Yes.
And so the world has been made to adopt certain film standards, might not conform with the way we tell stories. And so the challenge for us would be, even if we are expressing these very human emotions, it has to be done in a way that is universal to the standards that have been handed to us. And we might sometimes have to conform to those standards until such a time when we can build enough of an audience locally to not need the world. And in this case, the world would have to conform to us. The world conforms to Bollywood. When you switch on a Bollywood film, you're watching it with a completely different expectation and standards to what you do when you watch Hollywood. I remember the first time I watched Bahubali, and I was like, oh my God, like you have to completely suspend your understanding of physics and gravity, suspend it completely. And it makes sense. And you enjoy this picture. It's amazing. This guy flies in the air and turns around, or his boat takes off from the water and flies into the air. You can only do that in Bollywood because there has been a standard set that when you watch this film, you suspend your understanding of physics. But we haven't got there yet as Nollywood. And so human emotions are universal. We're going to tell those human emotions, express them in a way that the whole world can see them and understand them. However, we have to have great cinematography, has to be world-class cinematography. Why? Because if you don't, the audience is used to seeing great cinematography. They're not going to suspend, the expectation of great cinematography for you for a story they do not really have to watch when they have options. The world has options. It would not wait for you. So we have to tell stories that at the very least matches them technically, matches the things that they watch technically. In order, let them see the picture of like, okay, this looks great. And then, okay, watch the first 2 minutes and it's compelling. And they're not scratching their eyes out watching the entire thing. So those are some of the ingredients. Music, to get the music where it was, I had one of the best composers I have ever worked with, Anakle. He's amazing. And I'm like, I want the best in the industry, and he had to be the one. And Kulanin comes and tells me, sound design, I have got Thomas Bekay, who did Son of Saul, Oscar-winning film. He's expensive, but if we want this film to be a global film, we need sound design from a master. I'm like, yeah, that's what we want to do. This thing costs money, but you know what? Let's do it. And it is in those little things, those decisions to work with Thomas, and the sound design in the Black Book is really amazing. It's really amazing. You can hear everything the characters say. It is in knowing that, in shooting the market scene, markets are usually rowdy, but then you have to hear the characters, even though you're going to come and ADR the entire thing, but you want to be able to control the sounds in the different layers. So the extras walk around moving the lips but without speaking. And then you record the sound separately. Those are the little decisions that you have to make in order to tell a story that the rest of the world understands, because that's how the rest of the world tells their stories. There will be a time when we would have 1,000 cinemas in Nigeria. And that captive audience means that we do not need to go out to a global platform to have $1 million films. Then we can tell our stories in the way that we love them, in the way that our grandparents told them. But we have to remember too that even the audience that is African, is Nigerian, is evolving as well. The Gen Z audience hasn't grown up on a tradition of Ekonke like I did. My son, has grown up never worrying about internet access. He's never worried about power. He's gone to school, driven back, and now lives in a community where he can ride a bike wherever he's going. Like he wants to go somewhere, he rides a bike and he feels safe. And the stories he would want to be connected with, even though they are African, are a different standard to what my parents grew up with, or myself, I grew up with. And so our stories must evolve to also cater to these different audiences. I remember reading a conversation within the film community that said, Paul Edima's son said, Jesus, Santa Claus. That no, we don't say Santa Claus, we say Father Christmas. I'm like, the boy's age, the boy is 24. He grew up on Hollywood. He probably saw Santa Claus on TV before he saw it on the streets. That is why he wears a chain with a very agnostic symbol, because it's also the generation that is struggling with, religion more than at any other time. Whereas when I grew up, your parents took you to church, you went to church, you don't question, they say, God said this, and you said, yes, God said it, because that's what you raised with. But however, young people in this generation have a different point of view. And they are Africans. Their Africanness is no less than your Africanness. And so you cannot erase them by saying, oh, that's not how we tell our stories. because these Africans also exist who say Santa Claus because they were raised on Santa Claus. African stories must not just cater to Africans who have traditional values. Africans exist everywhere in different shapes, forms, and African storytelling must cater to all those different Africans. And then, of course, if we cater to a universality of Africanness, then it is quite possible that we can cater to the rest of the world. Again, very long-winded.
No, fantastic, fantastic. You raised even more questions in my head. For instance, in line with what you've said now, doesn't it become more challenging, therefore? How do we, because we're talking so much these days about telling authentic African stories, and you have set out to tell the next generation of African stories. So if we are having to force feed what we have into the current standards, are we really going to be able to achieve that? Because if our style of storytelling does not fit into those standards, then it means we're adapting. Can we really say then that we're still being authentic in that sense?
Then you have to define authenticity. What is authentic? Authenticity is in the lived realities of a people. If people can look at a picture and see themselves in it, then it is authentic. As we keep evolving, and pushing the boundaries, the thing the one and only thing that is required of us is that our people see themselves in the stories that we tell.
Mhm.
And this is why we wanted to tell a story of the Black Book. It was important that my parents saw themselves in that story. It was important that I see myself in that story. But it was also equally important that the 24-year-old sees themselves in that story. The kids we used to go and bail from police station every other week, because they have long hair, but they're super creative people. They're creating amazing things, but because they have hair a certain way, because expressing themselves in the way they best understand, they become targets in the street. If they see themselves in this story, they feel heard.
Right.
It's in that I believe we can define what is authentic. If Lagos, Nollywood, Lekki Koyi Bridge,
Mhm.
yeah, there are people in Lagos who have never seen in person Lekki Koyi Bridge.
True. Yes.
Lagos, Mercedes mansion with 4 columns. There are people in Lagos who have never seen a mansion with 4 columns
Mm.
or never ridden a Mercedes. So, yes, those are authentic African stories because those are the lived realities of people. And in more often than not, I'm gonna be honest, like people who are privileged, who have power, would tell the stories that they can understand. But it becomes more challenging for poorer people to tell stories because those stories are expensive to tell in motion picture. And so you might end up having to see too many stories of rich people who express their reality. And when they try to tell stories of the poor, sometimes it falls a little bit flat because they do not really understand how the poor exist. I've been poor. I've been I've been everything, to be honest, except like really rich. Well, we're not going to go there about my hopes and dreams, but I think that authenticity then is a good proper depiction of people at different levels. We need to tell a story that the people who live in Takwa Bay can see and identify The people who live in Lagos Island can see and identify. And we had to, for example, visually in creating the worlds, make them authentic to the places that they were. In Lagos Island, for example, how the market is organized, or the desaturated nature of of the buildings, and they had to be shown. It was very important to us not show big huge houses, because majority of people who live in Lagos don't live in big huge houses. It was very important for us to do that. And people, I do know that the convention, when you hear Lagos, you hear, oh, it's very colorful. That is what, like, that's the image. It's very colorful. But when you fly over Lagos and see the roofs just before you land, there's like brown roofs, and they're all very dusty. All the roads on the outskirts of Lagos, like, they're mostly untarred and red earth. That is a reality as well. That is an authenticity as well that has to be touched, has to be tangible. And so we have to understand that people live so many realities that are different to yours.
Sure. Great, great. They're very, 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 very key points, really. Sorry, before I go any further, let me just remind our audience, please drop your questions in the chat box if you have them, and we'll take them from there. Now, something else that you said, Editi, you said that we will be able to drive on style of storytelling once we are able to grow our audience, that a bit of that sense. How do you see this happening? Because given the challenges we have with distribution, okay, that they're really, just as you have said, the realities of so many people are quite different from, well, the one that tends to be touted. And many people do not have access. Many areas, most of the areas in this country do not even have cinemas, or even, you could say, viewing centers, for instance. Many of them do not have, well, this product doesn't get to them. So as a filmmaker, certainly that'll be one of your concerns, how to grow this audience such that one does not depend on an external audience. Do you have any ideas in this regard?
I mean, ultimately, I'm an existentialist. We Existence precedes essence. St. Thomas Aquinas. Existence always precedes essence. We have to learn to crawl, then walk, and then run. It is believed by some that if we run fast enough and flap our hands, rapidly enough, and we could get lucky and get caught in the wind and fly. Now, the Icarus effects kicks in, but again, things happen. We have over 60 cinema screens. 15 years ago, we probably had less than 20.
Yeah.
And shoot back to 1999, I do not think that we had any major functioning cinema screens in Nigeria. Before Silverbird, what was there? There were no malls because the economy was done. And now, return to democracy, economy picks up, and then people started feeding better. Under Abacha, people were eating, cooking with sawdust. It was the reality then. And then economy gets better, people get back to using stoves and then being able to afford gas. And then they fix their livelihood hierarchy of needs. And then they start wanting to go out, and they have a bit of spare money to go out and enjoy themselves. And then there's an opportunity to set up cinemas, because these people were watching films at home. They bought videotapes and played them at home. But then now there is a need to leave the four walls of your home and go enjoy outside and take your girlfriend somewhere, go and then be seen in flashy places, take photos there. And then there's now camera phones, and you want to go somewhere and be seen somewhere nice. I think that ultimately this would have continued and we would have had like much more expansion, but then the economy dipped since 2015, the economy dipped. And so that expansion of cinema screens has dropped. But the secondary layer to that is that if the economy grew to that point where the middle class continues spending on entertainment, it means we're going to hire more drivers, more chefs, more cooks, and those people would not go to the same cinemas as we go. However, they will go to their own cinemas, and so we will have a secondary level of cinemas. I know it's flashy, but like it's nice places, because if you have a driver, surely you know that your driver enjoys life more than you do, because his problems are different to yours, but he enjoys life more than you do. He has a bit more time on his hands. You might think because he drives you all day, but when you are in your meeting, what do you think he does on his phone? And so those people would, we're going to have like secondary layer of cinemas, and then those people who understand how people at that level of existence, organize themselves spatially and socially, can now build the next generation of cinemas in, say, northern Nigeria, in Midwest Nigeria, that are different to the ways that cinemas are done in the cities.
Yeah.
And so I think ultimately that a better economy ultimately just makes room for these things. Once the economy picks back up and people start having more spending power, these things naturally evolve. So I would rather not say let's put the cart before the horse. We're not going to stop telling stories because the economy is bad. We're also not going to tell stories in an unsustainable manner. We have to tell stories in the way that makes sense and is sustainable, so that investors get the money back and reinvest. Right. And I believe strongly that a better economy would mean Moses at Film One will expand the screens he has. I mean, if you Film House, expand the number of screens he has. Okwe would, make new investments. That's what I think. If I'm an investor and I say, okay, the economy is expanding and someone wants to come and raise money to build more cinema screens, of course it makes sense. But it doesn't make sense when the economy is shrinking.
Right.
Yeah, that's.
In one of your interviews, you spoke positively about the streaming platforms, the positive impact that the arrival of the international streaming platforms in Nigeria have had. They've provided new opportunities and so on. Now, with reference to what you just said about the need to grow organically, that's my own definition of that. Where do you place, or how do you see the growth of the indigenous streaming platforms? Because there are quite a few, and quite frankly, one would say that it is a bit of a challenge due to the lack of funding and the poor or the low audience or level. So how do you see that in this whole context of organic growth?
First of all, I think that I can reiterate what I said about the streaming platforms. I think they're a bridge. They are a bridge to allowing us access to a global audience. What the Black Book, for example, has done is that it's shown that a film with Black people, made by Black people, Black faces, can go anywhere in the world and be successful. And what that does is that the conversations we're having with, say, US-based studios is now different.
Right.
And you're having conversations like, if we make a good investment in a Nigerian picture, can we take it and say, put it in 1,000 screens in America and fail forward? And what does fail forward mean? Is that I want to invest $1 million, go to America, put it in those 1,000 cinemas, let the film fall out of cinemas in 1 week or 2 weeks and make $10 million only. Only. See what I mean? Just $10 million. Can you believe? The film failed. It flopped. However, what I also want to do is that I fell at $10 million and come back and do my split with my cinema houses and take my own share, and I'm like madly profitable.
Right.
And you can only do that because now people everywhere in the world, one of the most popular image in the last month is this image of Richard Murphy Damager sitting in a bus with the title Black Book in yellow across from him, across his body. It's one of the most popular pictures in the world over the last 1 month. See, even people who have not seen the film recognize him. And then if you put him on another front cover, I know this guy. I recognize this guy. See, so now these African faces haven't just been watched, but they've been recognized as stars. I love this guy's performance. So I want to see the next thing he is in. Now, so the streamers, only the streaming platforms could have helped us build that kind of bridge, that kind of audience, new audiences around the world. And then this big star of a man can now be in Hollywood productions, and they're like, oh, I know him. Yeah. And so that is the power of streamers, global streamers. And I know some people, traditionalists, who think we should only watch films in cinemas, and so streamers are bad. I am absolutely in disagreement. I'm an African person coming from a place of disadvantage. I'm never going to watch an advantage and say, oh, because for the love of art, I would not praise that advantage. Streaming is great for me. It's great for our storytelling. Of course, I'm going to be pro streaming. Now, what streaming has done for us with this one title for Nollywood is unquantifiable. It's broken down barriers, and we can go have different conversations, new conversations in new markets. You see, it is in entering new markets that we can raise money to come and invest at home. That is the play for me. That's my play. I want to invest in storytelling at home. I want to invest in studios resources. I want to invest in like camera resources. I want to invest in training. But that money is not exactly at home. Yeah, our economics don't support that, raising that kind of money. The economics don't support like that kind of liquidity. And so we have to find where it is. And if streaming allows us those new audiences, why do we can't quarrel with that. I cannot. I, for one, cannot. And so it just makes economic sense. Streaming is great. But now, local streaming, who is it catering to? It's a very important question. What is the data usage of people like Nigerians? And if a local local streamers obviously would start streaming local content because international content is like pretty expensive. Yeah. Rock Studios has done something. Roku TV did something, but ultimately Rock is maybe the biggest producer in Nigeria. That's producing for Canal Plus, for their platform, and for DSTV, African Magic, and Rock the stations. Well, it started from African Magic into Rock. There is that market. That's the way a lot of people consume content, and we should design products that match the way people use products. Right. And so if in the local communities, it is easier to go get money from a POS agent that if the transaction doesn't work, you can go home and come back and know that Idara will give you your money anyway, because Idara is your cousin, or at the worst, your mom's cousin. And so people trust Idara's POS operation to the bank ATM. And what does that do to bank ATMs? I went to Uyo the other day and I tried 3 ATMs and there was no money in any of them. And the security at the fourth bank said, oh, there's no money. I'm like, why? It says, oh, guy, just go POS. He didn't explain to me why, but he said, just go POS. And it is in that moment that I realized there were at least 10 POS agents between the first bank and the second bank. That way, there was not up to like 30 meters between them. every shop around the area had a POS agent. See, and that is fintech tailored to what people there, like how people behave, how people socialize. And so it's the same thing I believe needs to be done in media and streaming or whatever. People, we have to design products to the way that accommodates the way people behave. We shouldn't force people into new behaviors. It's harder, it's more expensive to do that. So there's people smarter than me who actually now know how people consume content in those locations, and I'm sure they can figure those things out. But if we are trying to build local streaming platforms for poorer Nigerians, I tell you what, they're going to circumvent the entire thing and go watch the thing free on YouTube or go download it on bootleg sites. Yeah. So
Tough question, right? Okay. Now, I see we have some questions here, but before we turn to them, because I see they're all about finance, or the ones I've seen so far, let me ask this question. With the Black Book, you created quite a buzz in the industry when you released the details of the budget of the film and how it was financed. That level of transparency was previously virtually unheard of. Okay. And of course, it led people to talk quite a lot. Why did you choose to do that? What was your goal?
I think that ultimately we have to democratize access to information, to finance, to the process of how films are made. I'm an outsider, I guess, in Nollywood. I came in 2018, and this is my first feature film. But I already had a career in advertising. We're more transparent over there. In technology, we're a bit more transparent as well. There is a culture of sharing knowledge in those two industries. And so I'm not doing anything that I normally would not have done with my other jobs. I'm talking about how things are made, how things are done, how things are built. So that's the thing. It's just a cultural thing that I come from industries where people share knowledge quite freely. Um, but in releasing the list of my executive producers, what I aim to do is to show that money for film can be raised from alternative sources. Again, democratizing funding and the process of funding pictures, pictures, of course, like films and TV. So that's the first thing. And secondly, I think like with the budgets, it's the same thing really. I there's nothing to hide. We suffer more by hiding
I agree with you.
because investors do not know how the industry works, how what takes up money. My investors now know exactly how films are made, how the film is made, how they're going to get the money. And so when they come into our next, a lot of them are already in our next our slates to fund our slate, and they know what to expect. And it does help that it's a very fantastic case study for them. But they, in being transparent, the transparency didn't start from when the film was released. Every Tuesday and Friday, minimum, while I was in set, I'll write an investor memo to my investors and say, this is what we're doing, this is what we are, these are the problems we're dealing with, this is how we are fixing them. These are the pictures of what we're doing on set, and these are the images that we've captured in film. And so they were able to follow the filming process from the very beginning to the end. And that transparency allows my investors to say, when I had COVID and had to shut down the set, and I tell them, look, we're going to lose about what 20% of our budget because not shooting for these many days, and you're still paying equipment, you're still paying people, you have to lock people down so that they can shoot afterwards. And so when we ran out of money and I had to raise more money, they knew why we ran out of money. I had to raise more money. When we were short about 20% of what we hoped to get, We knew that we could have made that much if not for COVID.
Yeah.
Right. And they say, okay, going forward, what do we do to avert this kind of loss? Okay, we're out of COVID now, so thank God you wouldn't lose that. But let's always plan for something like that happening. What is the worst that can happen?
Right.
How do we ensure that even if that thing happens, we're not losing that much money? So transparency is important for planning. It's important for showing what can be done and what should be done and learning in the future. And that's it really for me. I think it's important for the industry to have everyone understand this. And I admit I'm a very privileged person. I have a decently paying job. So if I stop making films today, I still have a job. Um, but there are people who don't. And it is important for us to not just try to work hard for ourselves, but for people who are not as privileged. I always say this, that my uncle said a thing that stuck with me forever. He said, I'm always going to fight for buses to be on the roads. I would probably never use a bus. I don't use a bus. I probably would never use a bus. But it's important for me to fight for buses on the road so that if one day by some freak reason I have to use a bus, the bus will be there for me. So yeah, I know that most messages I've gotten recently since this film came out is like, can you give me money to make my own film? But that's not the point of me doing this. The point of me doing this is showing you how I did mine. So if you want to replicate or you want to take that and break it apart and find parts that work for you, you can.
I must say, I think it did help a lot of people in that sense, because many people have now seen possibilities. They've seen options for where to go to raise money, because previously people are saying, well, where do I go? And now they've seen that it is possible to actually seek out private investors, identify that person who has a bit of money and wants to invest it somewhere. Now, I have
But
a
I
question here. I'm sorry, go ahead, please.
one follow-up is that even the banks have now sat back based on the information. I've spoken to like 6 banks, Nigerian banks. How do we structure our investment into films for Nigerians to work and make us returns? What should we look out for? And so chances are that if you go to your average commercial bank now, hopefully know where to knock, what doors to knock. They have a program, like they have a program for filmmaking, because they're looking for investment. And Naira, the way the Naira is going, you want to put the money away in a way that it multiplies. It's better for you to put money into assets now than to hold the cash, and what are the assets you can put, like, so the banks are also changing in the way that they view the creative industry. And I'm really glad that we have sort of contributed to that.
No, I'm happy to hear that, because we've been having this discussion forever about how the banks really can tap into all of this and do more. And it's been going on forever. So if they're beginning to find a way out of that, it's good news indeed. I have a question here from Peter, who says, question refinancing. Tech entrepreneurs funding a movie. Do you see this as the way to go for the Nigerian audience? You know more deals. Do you know more deals like this? This is Peter.
Tech entrepreneurs are not the only ones, and ultimately there's a finite amount of money that tech entrepreneurs have, and so they're not going to be able to fund every film. They also have very high standards. The tech industry does have very high standards, and so yes, I believe that more tech entrepreneurs are funding films, will be funding films in the foreseeable future, but they're not the only ones who can fund films. I believe that anyone with liquidity, if you structure a deal that they understand, can fund films. People in private equity can fund films. People in banking can fund films. There are family offices that have liquidity that can fund films. Yes, I know more deals are happening. 2 days ago, I happened across a filmmaker who's doing an amazing project, and he wanted me to come in an EP because they'd run out of money. And I just, instead of that, I connected them to some of my funders and say, go talk to them and raise money to do your film. I'm not a big fan of hamstringing an entrepreneur on the path to growth for my own profit. I have been lucky to not have that done to me, so it's important for me to help as much as possible without causing a roadblock. If the guy has run out of money while making his film, it means he has no options anyway. His profit margins are already like at a point where they're not sustainable, and so my job then would be to help and get out of the way. So there are deals like that happening.
Okay. Dio has a triple structured question here. He says, some of it I think you've already responded to. He says, what's the impact of the tech industry in filmmaking in the 21st century? Will cinemas still survive a decade in competition with streaming platforms like Amazon and Netflix? And is African film ready for the use of CGI in our stories?
The cinemas will always be here, will be here with us for a long time. So that's one thing I can tell you for free. The cinemas will be here. I watched the Black Book. When I watched it the first time on a big screen, I was like, no. Like I really was like, oh no, I wish. I know why we're doing what we're doing. It's important to return investment so we can be sustainable, but like I wish more people could see this on the big screen. It actually really is amazing on the big screen. So the cinemas will be there. People will always enjoy the big screen more than they enjoy their TVs at home. African film ready for the use of CGI in our stories? I know. Like, do you know how are you going to climb to heaven and film the birds and tortoise in the heaven having a feast? And what about when he falls from the sky and cracks his shell? Come on now, you're not actually going to get on a plane and jump down with a tortoise. And are you actually going to have a speaking tortoise in your story? So yeah, I mean, our stories require more CGI than anything Hollywood has ever made. So I would say that like we really need to get our CGI thing together and be able to do it locally because like there's so many stories that we need to be able to tell. Yeah.
Okay. Then I have a question here from Anulika, who says, thank you, Editi, for sharing your filmmaking journey with us today. I read a recent interview of yours where you said that only the streaming platform could enable you recover the $1 million investment of the Black Book. Did or has that happened? Were you worried about ruffling the feathers of cinema exhibitors in Nigeria since you bypassed them? What other dividends have accrued to you and your investors because of going directly to Netflix?
You do realize that like the cinema exhibitors are also the ones who are aggregators for the streaming platforms. Film One, for example, was my distributor for Up North, and the setup. They're the ones who sold the film to Netflix. And so they're not just distributors for cinema. Their money is platform agnostic. The color of money, nobody cares about the color of the skin. They care about the color of the money. And the color of money is green, preferable USD. Nobody will fight against dollar in this market. So that's the thing that you have to look at. As much as my contract means that I can't talk about how much we were paid, if this film failed, I'm sure you would have seen me being dragged by my investors. Don't worry about it. No, I don't think they would have done that. These are good people, but like, it would have been very disappointing, and it would have been very hard for us to plan for the future. No, so I don't think I've ruffled cinema exhibitors in Nigeria. We're all in this together. whatever we do that, and also I think the biggest dividend for us is that it exposed Nigerian films to a whole new audience. You know, we it might look like, okay, making the most successful African film on Netflix ever means that, oh my God, I've become king. No, it doesn't. It means that the next person that releases a Nigerian film on the platform, people are more comfortable to watch them. It's like, oh, let's see this other Nigerian film, because they saw this other Nigerian film and they liked it. So it's just that drip, drip, you know, drip, drip. Of course, it means that the next producer who's going out there to make that film is like, we can do this, we can do this, we can raise the standard, we can invest more because there's an audience. And of course, it improves the conversations that we are having, you know, with the streamers and buyers outside. I did already talk about like access to American cinema now because of this one thing. You know, when we say, look, pay us better because our films can actually, like, our films will be seen and we will give you new audiences everywhere else. Of course, now it's an important conversation that needs to be had and will be had on account of the success. So that's the other and the most important. Actually, the most important dividend is new audiences. If we have guaranteed new audiences, the sky is the limit to, you know, yeah.
Indeed, it is. I have a question here from Emmanuel, who says, greetings to you, sir. I am privileged to be part of this meeting, listening to you and directly. You have given us your background from tech to ad and from ad to film, and most especially the African story. I have seen Up North and Setup, though yet to see Black Book, because I wish to take my time on it. From your wealth of experience and your inside mind, what would you advise the upcoming filmmakers who are more or less perfectionists, so critics like you, who don't even intend to venture into regular filmmaking, but more of the unique African story? Secondly, I have noticed you don't do cultural or historical stories, so to say. Are you planning on one, or do you wish to venture? I am Emmanuel Asukwo, mascot from Cross River State, a cinematographer, makeup, stroke, SFX artist. That's a long one.
Yang teng kenya yang ini kop deh. All right. Now that's just between me and Emmanuel. All right. I when I'm asked to advise young and upcoming filmmakers, and I'm like, this is my first feature film, Moose, just so you know. Like, I'm not a veteran. I'm an up and coming filmmaker. All the advice I have is as much to myself. And everything I know, I'm like literally on the path of still learning those things. So I'm not like a person who's known so much. Like, I'm literally like, I'm learning as I go. All right. So I have to reiterate that all the time. I'm still learning. I'm still learning so much. So when you talk about people who are more or less perfectionists and critic, um, I don't know what unique African stories are. I mentioned this before. It's like saying that the Africans who don't wear kente or babariga or wear suits to work are not African enough.
Yeah.
I disagree with that. You know, there are so many different Africans, and every one of us is unique. Every one of our perspectives is important, is valid. And so I would never, ever stand to say unique African story. What is unique about an African is they existing and being African. Simple. So if that is, the Black Book is an African story. The story of SARS is an African story, is as unique to Africa, to Nigeria, as Ekonke. These are the lived experiences, not fairy tales, lived experiences of Africans. And I'm gonna be a bit firm here in saying, like, when people say, oh, like Hollywood can tell John Wick but Nigerians should not tell an African, an action film when people are shooting guns. That's not unique to us. My brother, let me tell you, first things first, there are no assassins clubs in America and hotels where assassins go in there and it's the continental, it's neutral ground where assassins cannot kill each other there. It is a lie. Those are not even authentic American stories because it's fake. It's a lie. It doesn't exist. It is fiction. So how are you saying that as Africans we cannot create fiction, and creating fiction is only the preserve of Hollywood? Come on, people. So you're telling me I don't do cultural historical stories? Are you joking, man? There is more history in the Black people than almost any Nigerian film I have seen in the last 10 years. Sorry. Do you know that there was a thing called the strike force during the Abacha years? Before Abacha, they had the similar structure in other military regimes, but Abacha strike force was pretty deadly. And then when it had about 40 people in it, it was run by Major Hamza Mustafa. And at the advent of democracy, those courts were disbanded. The question for you is, where are those men today? Where are those men who were disbanded? You know the names, you know where they live, they're your friends' dads, right? They come to church, they come to mosque. They are ordinary people living amongst you. You do not know who they are. That is more history than John Wick, right? And when you're telling me if I'm planning to do historical stories, I already have. The Black Book spans 40 years, inspired by 40 years of Nigerian history. Now, if you take every single character and go sit down with a Put Up Panel report and a few news watch articles or Tell magazine, you're going to find the people who inspired those characters. So please don't tell me I'm not telling historical or cultural stories. I already have. I made up north, sir. Thank you.
Great. Now, Adabu says, thank you, Mr. Effiong, for taking the time to speak to us. My questions are, why was it essential for you to depict female characters in the manner you did, considering the limited recognition of women in Nigerian history for their contribution in shaping the country's revolution? P.S. One of my new favorite catchphrases right now is share the groundnut.
I should have worn that shirt. I have one. I have a shirt. Chichi shirt. Yeah, I
share
do
the
have one.
groundnut. The second question is, what kind of impact did you hope the Black Book would have on audiences, both in Nigeria and internationally? What reactions or responses from audiences have been most rewarding or surprising to you? Ah, that's right. You share the groundnut.
Okay. Women. I think the thing I love the most about this thing is that you ask the question, I answer your question. So I don't have an answer because I don't have to answer because you already answered. See, there is a clear. We often don't recall or represent women in those stories, and so it was very important for us to write female characters into the stories, even in history they didn't exist in the manner in which we depicted them. But there was a clear erasure of women across Nigerian history, and I'll tell you an example. During the military regimes, 99% of leadership positions in government went to men. 99. It's not like it's improved much,
Yeah.
but it's 99, absolute. And because all the positions were military boys who were already oversaturated with men, and I mean, women weren't even able to go to Nigerian Defense Academy until very recently. And so there is that. And then when you look at it, like, there were no women in power. And when Babangida's transition was being designed, they were trying to write a a constitution, and they asked the military man who was overseeing the constitutional committee to preserve 5% of leadership positions for women. He said that that would lead to reverse, what's that phrase he used? You know, when you try to get black people into university and create a special program for them, what is it called? What is it called? Sometimes I'm not a very smart person, so please bear with me.
Sorry. No, I think we're all forgetting the word right now.
Affirmative action. He said it will be reverse affirmative action, and it would affect men negatively. 5%. At a time when 99% of leadership positions across the entire country, from federal to LGA, was occupied by men exclusively. And so it comes back to, I was raised by my mother who worked really hard, and my grandmother who worked really hard to put my mother in school. And I could see my mother work and then not get recognition on her work, even though she was a really smart person. And so I make it my point, make it a point. I hire women in my office. I hire women first. Like we have a 60 to 40% minimum women positions. Leadership, the same thing. It's very important for me to do this because I saw my mother, suffer. I'm the son of my mother. And so there's one. Two is just simply like, look, I always say to African women, if anybody says I'm not a feminist, sorry, don't be annoyed. Because here's how I see it. For almost 50 years of secondary school being established in Nigeria, all of them were boys' school. King's College, SPC in Calabar. What's this other school in Calabar that was the first one that, Jesus Christ, I grew up here. How am I'm being forgetful today. Hope Waddell, where Nambi Azikiwe went. Every secondary school was boys' school. The communities contributed money and sent the boys to school. All right, made scholarships for men, only men. And so for 50 years, all the people who grew up and got into leadership and got into whatever before Queen's College was set up to allow women to go to school, another, for every female school that was set up, at least 20 boys' schools were. And then so when all these boys came out for 50 years, they had a head start. And so all the politicians were men. And so when they sit in the room, it's not that they don't like women. It's just like the only people you're really going to deal with in these situations is like guys you know. And all your guys are boys because they were only boys' schools. And so you have that 50-year head start. And in technically it's actually a 70-year head start, because if you start it still doesn't cater to enough women. And so you have that long period of a head start in the country, and all of a sudden you're trying to set up a fund for only women and say, why are you doing this? You had 70 years of uninterrupted affirmative action for men, and then all of a sudden someone sets up a fund to address the gap, and you're like, why are you excluding men? When only men were going to school, who was arguing? No, really, let's think about it. Who was saying this is wrong? Nobody did. But then you want to set up a thing for schools and girls, you want to set up a business foundation for girls, and you're like, why excluding men? You had 70 years reigning supreme. There's never been a female president, there's going to be any other thing. So why are we arguing? So yes, I am unapologetically going to do this again and again and again. The women in my films will carry guns and be badass and have great lines, and be the one saving the day. Because when all the action stars in the world existed, Bruce Willis, Rambo, who was complaining? Yeah, so that is a long-winded answer. Please do not expect short answers from me. I'm not used to it.
Okay. Well, Dio says, in the Black Book, did you use any Hollywood film and Hollywood characters as a reference? I see more of Denzel Washington, The Equalizer, and Keanu Reeves, John Wick.
Dio, go pick up Newswatch. Go read your Putapanel report, because Sergeant Rogers was right there. Except you don't believe Nigerians could be assassins. You don't believe there were assassins in Nigeria, and I'm sorry, Dio, there were. Okay, go read the Putapanel report. That entire existence of the strike force is what inspired the character of Paul Edima. And we're very, very clear in building the same age. You would have to be the same age as those guys. Those guys are in the 60s today, early 60s. And this character of Paul Edima was aged the same way to exist in that time. So I honestly don't know how to talk about this enough without getting killed. Right? Don't kill me. I have to survive to tell other stories. Thank you very much. Because as we said at the bottom of the film, all of this is fiction. But please, Jesus Christ, we need to tell our stories more. We need to tell our history more. Like we need to teach our history more, because like I don't understand how it's so obvious. Jesus Christ, when Vic tells Paul what day was it, and said June 4, 1996, and points her hand. Can you Google that date versus a woman who died on that day? It was not a journalist. She was not a journalist, but we know who she was. It was Kudirat Abiola who died on that day. Who killed Kudirat Abiola, guys? I'm sorry, it's actually quite annoying to see us not know our history, and then it was like Denzel Washington and Ken Reeves, John Wick. Jesus Christ.
Well, you know that has been said that a key aspect
I
of
think I'm
our
going to address
curriculum
this.
has to be history.
I'm gonna address this in a way. I said, oh, they're pointing to me and say it's not authentic to Africa what you're saying, that I'm being influenced so heavily by Hollywood. That's why you're saying that it is John Wick. Meanwhile, your entire film education is by Hollywood, and that's why you cannot see anything outside of Hollywood. But you accuse me, whose character is based 100% on Nigerian realities, that I am not. So you've been so steeped in Hollywood that you don't even recognize Nigeria anymore. That is the reality. You don't recognize your own home anymore. You do not know your history enough. So you see a person who is telling your history in film and you think, oh, that must be Hollywood. You don't rate yourself enough. You don't respect yourself enough to see yourself. So you can only see a reflection in the mirror of yourself and you see that person and it's white. It's sad.
I guess that emphasizes
the situation.
it emphasizes the importance of history. We need to study the history a bit more. Let's turn to Barry Nidham, who says, "Hi Editi, thanks for sharing. In the context of the film Black Book, how can emerging filmmakers learn to secure access to resources such as authentic props and exceptional film locations, even in challenging environments like the North, as depicted in the film?" I will hasten to Editi's aid by pointing out, like he has already said, that he's also learning the ropes. Okay, yeah. I don't know if you want to.
So a lot of the guns were provided by the police, and I wrote to the IG of police and made pitches, and they finally approved those weapons. There were times when we didn't have enough, and we went to the prison service, and there are people who were able to, midwife the process, and it was a shortcut. But it's always good to have the official cover for a lot of the things that you do. Because like if you're found with a gun on set and it was taken illegally from the police, you might go to jail.
Yeah.
So there is that, and so always apply and get proper approval for props. About those locations, I'd say if you're a storyteller, the biggest investment you can make in your storytelling is just travel. Go to places, visit places. I spent 2015, end of 2015, and in 2016, just traveling the entire country and meeting people. That's what actually inspired my first story, Up North. So travel, speak to people, learn the history of a people, listen, go to the bars, like, no, really, beer parlor. Go sit down there with people and just listen to them and talk to them and let them tell you stuff. So that's it for me.
Okay, thank you, Editi. Ian Olua says, "Thank you for your time. My question is, can we see Black Book as a model of screenwriting and direction? If yes, how?"
I'm not the best screenwriter in the world. I'm not the best director in the world. I don't even know what kind of director I am because this is my first one. So I would say that you choose who your model is and follow them. I am not your role model. I'm going to tell you that for free. I am not your role model or anyone's role model. I am still learning this thing. I'm still learning. I'm going to be better tomorrow. The Black Book is probably the worst film I will ever make. But so why would you follow something that I think is the worst film I'll ever make? Who knows? If you think that's my judgment. Now, if you think it's the film that you should follow, fine. If you don't think it's the film that meets your standard and you shouldn't follow, that's also fine. Find your own roads, find your own stories, find your own models, and follow them. But I am not your role model, definitely.
Okay, there's another question from Dio, which, if you will permit me, Editi, I will respond to. He says, will the film industry be a contributor to the Nigerian economy soon? I beg your pardon. I hasten to say that it has been contributing to the Nigerian economy forever. If you imagine the number of persons employed on just one film set, the caterers, all the people who are working at locations, all the grips, everything together, it's massive. And then you multiply that by the number of films being produced. And the last interview I had with the late P. Sanyamusigwe, she pointed out that that month alone in Asaba, this is just Asaba alone, in that month alone, about 400 films were made. Imagine the impact on the economy that that has. It's tremendous. It's just that since it's so much in the informal sector, much of it is not captured, but it's real. Okay, Dio, it's real. The industry is contributing massively to the economy. Well, let's turn to
Add,
Faith, who says,
I think I would add that the
so
film
go
industry
ahead.
contributes to the economy while films are being made and after films are being made. And doesn't matter how small the film is, people will be fed on sets. You will pay people
Yes.
who are working, and then when the film now goes to cinema or goes to streaming, that money comes back, and people now spend the money that they got from profits or whatever. So that's a two-way spend profile, and so we have to see it beyond what we think it is. People really have to understand the industry and how it works to understand how it contributes to the economy.
Yes. Great. Thank you. Dima Faith says, Aditi, your journey encourages me. You having come from a programming background and bringing that to visual storytelling, and myself from an international law and development discipline. I'm working to create visual experiences with the nuances from these backgrounds. I'd love to understudy. Do you currently have, or are you looking to set up such directing or filmmaking understudy / internship programs at Anakle at this time? That look on your face.
And my answer is that, like, honestly, maybe the third, fourth thing down the road I can do that. I'm still a learner in this thing. Like I'm really still just learning. If we have interns doing production all the time. I provide those like opportunities for like doing productions, but on the overall, I am very careful at this time. There are people who have done this thing for 10, 15 years and who have better knowledge and understanding of how the industry truly works than I do. Um, and so I would say that I'm probably not the best role model in the industry. I'm not the best person to learn from in the industry. I learn from other people, and I'm here because of the lessons I learned from them. So there are people who are more qualified to teach people about how this thing really works than I do. What I have is a lot of grit and audacity, and I don't know if that's a thing that you can teach people. Um, and this is an example. You're like stupid hungry, but you know that you can't stop because you stop something will spoil, and then you do it afraid and you do it hungry, and then you go home and cry because the scale is defeating you. But the next morning you wake up and wash your face clearly and make sure your eye is clean and put eye drops and then come out and start it again. I have an incredibly I, I I can take a lot of pain. I can take a lot of hits, and I don't know if that's something that is a trauma, like trauma training or trauma induced, but I don't know if you can teach a person how to suffer. I don't look like it, But like I can as the one thing I tell people, like you cannot outwork me. You can't. I'll run faster, I'll run harder, I'll do everything. Like if it needs for me to be awake 48 hours, I would. I stood on my feet for 26 hours during the shoot of this film. I can do that. I don't know how to teach people how to do that. I never ask people to do the things like when I know it's excruciating, I would never ask you to do a thing. You have to be a choice on your own to do those things because you know you've decided that this is what I need to do to take me to where I need to go to. That's why I do the things that I do. I have an image in my head of where I want to go to, and it's why I do the things I do. But I don't know if I can teach you grit. I don't know how to teach. I can teach you how to suffer because this journey, it looks sexy, it looks beautiful now. I'm on cover of magazines and the news and stuff. But I suffered incredibly. I should post a photo of me before, during the shoot, and today. I look a very different person. You don't want to talk to me then. So I don't know what I can teach anyone, but I do know that if you want anything and it doesn't matter who you are, if you really want to think hard enough and you do put the work in and speak to people who know for guidance, but if you push it hard enough, you get it. I would end this by saying that I surrounded myself with experts, veterans, because I believe that they knew so much more. But the thing about leading people is that it doesn't matter how knowledgeable those people are. As a director, as an EP, as a producer, when stuff goes wrong, all those veterans turn around, look at you and say, what are we going to do? And then you realize that because you are the one behind this vision, you have to find an extra gear. And surrounding yourself with veterans will not help you. You have to find it within yourself. And so you have to prepare to find those solutions, to find that light in the dark where other lights have gone out. And that is all I'm going to leave here. You have to find a way, even if there is no way. It's the only way. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Editi. Well, our time is up, really. We have still so many questions, but I think we will have to, well, allow Editi to rest his throat. But we just take one last one. If you can just give a quick response to this one, Editi. Folakemi is asking, I'm curious to know the percentage of local to foreign crew members in the production. This links to something you just said.
95% local.
Great. Great. Okay, well, I'm so sorry, people. We have so many questions here, but I don't know. Well, if you want
If
to scroll
those
through
questions are sent
and
to me, I can answer them on Twitter later on over the course of the day.
fantastic, fantastic, great. We'll do that. We'll do that. We'll send the questions to you so everyone can look out for the responses on Twitter. Edith, thank you so much. I have truly enjoyed this conversation and wish we could go on and on and on. Thank you. This was, even though you thought you were giving extra long answers, but they were fantastic. I truly enjoyed this. Thank you so much. We have to invite you to our campus sometime to meet with our students. You know, I think everybody will truly enjoy this. Thank you so much. And thank you to the members of our audience. Thank you for your questions. I'm sorry we couldn't take all of them live here, but we will share them with Editi, and then please look out for his responses on Twitter, or rather X, as I say these days. Okay, thanks so much. Thanks
Thank
so
you
much.
very
And
much.
enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you.